I love being introduced to the audience saying that I'm a bit nuts. Thank you very much. It's a great privilege. It's a great privilege to stand in front of all of you. I am acutely aware of the value of your time. And it's huge pressure on me to try and add value. Enough to justify this beautiful location, the sunshine I've got on my slide, and your time. Thank you very much. So, what a challenge. Where do I start? So here's my plan, right? I'm going to cover things in 3 chapters. Feel free to keep it interactive. If you disagree with something, I'm happy for you to hackle and ask and challenge me. And if you ask enough questions or you look interested enough or you stay awake, in the first chapter I might stay there, right? But the first chapter is about things that I think business in general miss that's really important. Things that I see in Google, but it's not exclusive to Google. I've seen it elsewhere as well. So I'll spend a bit of time on that. And then chapter 2 is to try and de-cloud things a little bit. What is cloud? What is it we do? How can that perhaps help you? And hopefully you'll see there's a link between the first 2 things and the cloud bits. And then I want to finish with looking a little bit forward. One, what's the future going to bring, but also what's the opportunity for you right now? So let's start with the 2 things that I think businesses don't do enough of. So I included the number 2 there, a bit of graffiti to remind me to tell you the story about Google. Don't tell anybody the story externally, but we once got into the office in Victoria and somebody had graffitied the wall. And the security cameras quickly told us that it was a Googler. And the reaction of the organization was to say, maybe we should have a graffiti wall in the office. And we do now have a graffiti wall in the office, both one that's professionally done by graffiti artists, and also one that's, many, that's just whiteboards. Anybody can just scribble anything on, right? And it's a great thing, right? So the point I want to make is, do we fail enough? Do we fail fast and do we fail enough? I'll come back to that. And the other one is transparency. Paul mentioned self-driving cars. Yesterday I had the privilege to test drive a Tesla Model S. I dream about one. I've got no intention to buy one. Sorry, Tesla. It's a beautiful car. It's a fantastic car. The most exciting thing was not the awesome acceleration. Wasn't this super smooth, dead quiet environment that I was driving in. The most awesome thing was to see the self-driving mode, the autopilot they've got. It was astonishing. M4 yesterday, sort of 4:30, traffic everywhere. And you can see this car is aware of the cars around it and stays within the lanes. And the salesperson that was, sorry, not salesperson, the product specialist, they call themselves, sitting next to me, hands off the steering wheel, hands off all the controls, and the car was controlling itself, staying on the motorway. Then she flicked on the indicator, and the car looked around and changed lanes. Beautiful. It was just an awesome experience. Technology can't do that today. We just need legislation, everything else to catch up, right? So, yes, that was amazing. But one of the interesting things that this person told me from Tesla, and I don't want to make a judgment about Tesla itself, but we were talking about Elon Musk, and I was telling her how much I respect him and how incredible inspiration he's been to me personally. And she told me one thing that made me realize how important transparency is. He said that even Elon has sent them as employees an email. And I realized that actually it's astonishing the transparency we've got in Google and the value of that. So I just want to pause a little bit on that.
Does that include your taxes?
Yes. Thank you for the heckle from the floor. I like heckles. Well done. Give that man a T-shirt. No. So having transparency internally and externally, yes, is really, really important. So every Friday, Larry and Sergey is on stage, flip-flops, shorts, answering questions from us as Googlers. Anybody can raise a question. Nothing is taboo. Anything goes. And I remember the day that this photo was taken here in London by me, sitting sort of 2 rows away from Larry with my phone, so it wasn't sort of a long zoom lens, just after we acquired Nest. And I put up my hand saying, Larry, I'm delighted that we're in this market now of Internet of Things and thermostats and so on, but what were you thinking when you spent this much money on it? And actually, it was a great response that he gave and explained why it was the right amount, even though it was more than would be typically paid for the organization, but it was the right time for us to do that. We've just sold bits of that as well, and we've just had the founder of Nest leave as well. But the foundation of that technology was the right acquisition for us at the time. My point being the transparency that it creates when you can sort of ask your execs questions and get the answers means that the whole organization can march in the right direction at the right pace. Everybody can make the right decisions. So I want to turn this from a presentation to something that hopefully can impact your lives. I want you to think about your organization, the place where you live and work. I want to challenge you, what can better transparency do there? How can that empower the smart people around you to make the right decisions? There's an enormous amount of transparency within Google. There's access to just about everything we're working on internally, and no customer data, but all the source code, for example, we've got access to. Anybody can log a ticket, for example, to ask, why are we not acquiring this company? Or would it not be beneficial to make this move or make this change to the company? And all of those are seriously considered. And I can spend much more time around that. But because people are nodding off, I won't do that. So transparency is one thing that I think businesses are not doing enough of. The second one is failing fast. Let me spend a little bit of time on that. So Google is well known for moonshot thinking and 10x thinking, and there's a ton of really good videos around that. The head of our Google X group is Astro Thaler. Just Google him, just have a look at TED Talks. There's a lot of good content around that. But I want to tell you a few stories about failing fast and the importance of that. And in order to keep your interest, I'm not going to tell you just Google stories. So I'm going to start by telling you just my own personal stories. I founded a startup 8 years ago that was a spectacular failure. And I'm proud to say that because I've learned a lot from it. But one of the mistakes I made, one of the many mistakes I made was I knew early on that there's some fundamental flaws in our decision making. Yet, I knew that if I would acknowledge that, it would cause so much problems that I sort of stuck my head in the ground, continued ignoring those. Guess what happened, right? No prizes for guessing, by the way. What would happen in your organization? Question number 2 for you. What would happen in your organization if there was no fear of failing? If everybody could actually try things, try new things, be brave to do things that probably they can't do right now because they're scared maybe it might not work. You know, I saw a beautiful example of this failing fast style of thinking in one of my colleagues recently. This colleague decided, so he's responsible for sort of, I spoke to one of the 6-degree people as well who's got a similar role, Claire, I think was her name, business development, call center, phoning up people, trying to find new business, trying to get renewals. So this colleague of mine decided rather than calling out everybody as he would normally do, he's going to try an experiment. He decided he's not going to call any customer that's got a name that starts with S. And let's see what happens. Guess what? The renewal rates was exactly the same for those customers as the others. Now he knew that his team added no value. Okay, so the next thing he did was he redeployed his team to do other things and to actually try and write letters, try and meet customers. And he immediately saw take-up in renewals. So immediately he innovated and got some great results. Now the bit that I didn't tell you was the first bit when he stopped calling the S customers. He didn't tell anybody about that because, well, what happens if it fails, right? But he had the guts to try it and he learned from it. So the whole idea of learning from mistakes, you know, that's what kids do. That's what we as humans naturally do. You know, you take a bit of dirt, you put it in your mouth, and you realize, you don't like the taste of this. You try it again, you again don't like it. You decide, no, I'm not going to do that. I'd rather do the chocolate thing, right? So we learn by trying things and learning from our mistakes, right? When last did you, in your role, try something radically new? What could happen if you could try something new? Okay, end of chapter 1. This is an Eric Schmidt quote from his book. He says, in Google, we set unattainable goals, and then we provide a framework to catch people when they fall, and we learn from that. So this is the penguin that sort of tried to strap a rocket to his back. Didn't quite work as planned. He didn't go into space, but there was a big hole in the ice, and therefore he could fish there, right? So he benefited from it by learning from some of the mistakes. So chapter 2, I did a Google image search for magic cloud. And I got this. I added the little flame there just to sort of help paint out this picture of this dragon in the sky, if you haven't noticed yet. And it's a good thing I did this because there's not a lot of clouds visible. Well, maybe there are some clouds outside. So let me try and demystify for you, or decloud a little bit what cloud is. It wasn't a shock for me. When I spoke to some of you beforehand, I realized that actually all of us have got a different perspective of what cloud really is. And I'm not going to say I've got the answer. I think the closest answer I can give is cloud is a marketing term everybody's trying to jump onto. But I think Paul did a great job of highlighting some of the essential business outcomes you should expect from cloud. So I just want to highlight to you one or two of those things that I think is fundamental to some of the magic and why cloud is so interesting for me and for us, really. So the first one is if you wind back the clock to a gazillion years ago, the fundamental components of a computer is the memory, the processor, the hard disk, and later on the network, right? And just about anything you run on that stack bottlenecks at some point. At some point, one of those things give up because it can't do anymore. And that's where things just grind to a halt. Now, the sad thing is, the majority of IT on the planet right now is working to overcome these limitations. I think that's sad because that's not really the interesting space. It's not the space where new things happen. It is simply dealing with the limitations we put in place 20 years ago when we built these things, right? So when Google engineers, when Urs Holz, who was the starter of our data centers, was hired to try and figure out how do you build a data center that's going to be able to index the whole planet's internet? He realized that he cannot start from a single node computer that's got these limitations. He had to build sort of an idea of, as Paul mentioned, the system as a whole unit. So we sometimes call it the data center is a computer or is the computer. In fact, this is the picture I decided to put up rather than this one, which is ugly. This one sort of says, the outcome is you want a simple interface, and then the complexity behind it you really don't care about. Right? This is, when Paul mentioned, focus on the things that differentiate you. This is it, right? Focus on the things that makes your business better, your organization better, make you achieve more rather than try and do the plumbing, right? By the way, the pipes in the background are all pipes really in Google, really the real colors painted to cool some of our data centers. You don't need to worry about the cooling because it's somewhere else, right? So we've already started this journey many, many years ago and had to build a solution for how do you write programs that doesn't have to care about the disk, the memory, the CPU. How do you build an environment where the developer can focus on solving the business problem and not, well, what do I do if I run out of CPU processing time? And in fact, this pie chart I've seen referenced quite a lot in the industry about roughly how much time you spend when you try and solve, let's say in this case, a big data problem. And you probably can't read the labels, so it doesn't really matter, but you're spending time on monitoring it, you're spending time on resource provisioning and utilization improvements and so on. One of my customers recently told me that their SLA with a big 3-letter hardware provider is that when they spin up a project, the hardware provider guarantee that they will give them a quote for the machines they need for it within 3 weeks. That's crazy, right? That doesn't make sense, right? In 3 weeks, the project should be finished, not you should have the quote for the hardware you need. What cloud is doing, the magic of cloud, is that actually it allows you to ignore all the other bits that's not giving you the business differentiation and focus on the business differentiation, just as Paul said. So I'm repeating what Paul said here. Hopefully that gives you confidence it's true, right? 2 of us said it, it must be true, okay? This slide, I was humming and hawing whether I should keep it in or out. But I think it's important to keep it in. So this, by the way, is a slide that actually Spotify presented to the internal audience when they discussed their move to Google Cloud Platform. In fact, the next few slides are all from Spotify's internal conversations about Google. So I just briefly want to, if this doesn't make sense to you, you've not missed much. But I just briefly want to explain to you how we see the evolution of cloud, which I think is quite important. So the first iteration of cloud that's gone a long time ago already was sort of co-location stuff. So you take your machines, you put it in somebody else's building. You don't need to worry about the air conditioning. You don't need to worry about the power, but the machine is still your problem, right? Wave 2 was where you take your machine, you put it in a virtual machine somewhere in somebody else's environment. You don't have to worry about the power, not about the air conditioning, not about the physical machine, but you're still constrained by the physical machine. You still need to patch it and manage it and what have you. And we are really excited about the Wave 3 stuff, which we regard as fully managed. You don't care about it. You just call the Vision API, you give it the image, and it comes back and give you the full description saying, yes, this looks like a person that's likely to be happy by this level of certainty in what looks like an office with a logo in the background that looks like a logo of this company, right? So that kind of technology exists today. Do you care about how many processors, how many memory, how many disk space? No. You upload the image, you get the answer back. That's how Google Translate API works. That's how our speech API works. You want to pass it a gazillion hours worth of speech telephony records and see where somebody mentioned a certain word? Yeah, you do it. You pass it and you get back the answer, right? So that kind of capability is available today, and you as a business don't need to think or care about how it works or, again, the infrastructure. You just use the service, right? That's sort of the Wave 3 stuff. That's where we're going, right? And just to highlight again another angle on this, again, Spotify, I love this tweet by the head data scientist at Spotify. Recently, they came out with this, they recently made a big PR announcement about the fact that they are now running fully on Google Cloud Platform, and they've moved a lot of our services across. And he said, finally, I can tell the world that BigQuery is the best thing that has ever happened to me. Maybe ever is pushing it a bit. Maybe there's some further opportunities for Matthias to do some other interesting stuff. But it is interesting to see how this technology, if you can ignore the infrastructure, ignore the CPUs and disks and what have you, right? I've been there as well. I've for my sins, ran a business, installed hard disk, installed NAS and SAN, try and configure things, etc. If you can stop worrying about that and focus on solving your business problems and getting the business outcomes, that's really exciting space. So just allow me to just go quickly on a tangent. So an example of this, one of the many examples of this Wave 3 kind of capability that Google provide is, as I mentioned, the Vision API and Translate API, etc., etc. Google Maps and so on. But one of them is BigQuery. BigQuery is really essentially, think of it as a massive, massive database. Now you can upload a few records to it, but you can also upload millions of records to it if you wanted to. And you don't need to think about, again, disk space or processing power or anything else. You just use it as you want to. Now, literally within 30 seconds of creating a Gmail account, you can have this up and running, and you can upload your data and you can query it. The beauty of this thing is that it can scale near infinitely, right? So I realize this text is probably too small to read. In fact, I can't even read the prompter's text here in front of me. But some of the data points there, which is quite interesting, is the largest query by rows covered 10.5 trillion rows. The largest query by data size, 2.1 petabytes. I tried to find an example on the internet of what's a petabyte. I couldn't find anything that really resonated because it's just big, right? It's sort of all the DNA sequences of everybody in the States doubled and then doubled again and cloned, and you still don't have enough to consume that. The largest storage customer, we've got a customer storing 62 petabytes. We've got a customer doing 4.5 million rows per second. That's sort of all in this one extreme. Anybody think they need more than that? Okay, right. So I want to tell you it also applies to the other extreme of this spectrum. Right? Alfred built a home automation thing at home with a Raspberry Pi trying to get the lights to go on and off. Funny thing, I had a the menu system for this thing became more and more complex to the point where the family just rejected it. And then I introduced voice recognition as part of the way to interact with it, and the family loved it. And then I got clever, and I made it that if the kids talk to this voice recognition thing, and they don't say please, then it doesn't do it. So I had this thing built, but there was a problem with it, and I needed the database to sort of debug it. And I tried to get MySQL on the Raspberry Pi, and the Pi didn't like it, and it crashed, and blah. Then I pointed it at Google Cloud SQL, and I said, take all of the records and just shove it into this cloud so that I can then analyze it and figure out why is my Raspberry Pi crashing at night. Didn't get time to play with it further after that. I came back sort of 3 days later, and I found that there was 13.5 million rows in the database, and it was still crunching away nicely, no problem. And I got the bill at the end of the month from Google for 62 cents. Right? So the beauty of this is you don't need to worry about the infrastructure. Whether it's small or big, you can just use it and pay for what you use. So this was, again, a graph that Spotify presented, which I think is obvious, and I think all of you will know this, but it will depict in a very nice way why the cloud is economically also more cost-effective for you in most cases. So if this was your database, pick any number, and you did some analytics on the database, and sometimes you needed more workload, more CPUs to do some of the crunching, and other times you just needed less. What do? Do you make your machine this big? And if it is, then what happened to the times when you need more processing? Well, that's the reality of most systems today, right? When you make that query 9 o'clock in the morning when everybody else is trying to make it, or when I'm trying to use my CRM system in the evening when all the US guys come online, then it's slower, right? So that's what's happened right now in most systems. So the other thing is, when it's not consuming all of that resource, you're wasting a lot of resources just sitting there waiting to work, right? So one way to solve this problem is you just buy a bigger system. But then this waste is even bigger. Or the other way to solve the problem is you just pay for what you use. And that's another thing that a cloud model should give you. Not all providers do this the same. But Google absolutely only charge you for what you use. So if you buy virtual machines, you pay per minute. Right? So if you need the virtual machine for 17.5 minutes, you pay for 18 minutes. Right? Nothing more. So that's a really important differentiator. That is partially what makes the cloud an interesting way to solve those first two problems. How do you create more transparency? How do you get to the answers? I had a fascinating conversation, not personally, not one-to-one, but Ruth, our relatively new CFO, came and spoke to us at Google a few weeks ago. And in a previous life, she was involved in the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, and IAG collapses in the US, all the big financial problems. And she was saying, the one line that she said, which really shocked me after she described how it happened and what she was involved in and so on, was she said, we worked throughout the night and throughout the weekend, and we got these calls and important meetings with whoever to try and solve this problem, and do we bail out the banks and what have you. And then she said, and then we discovered we were working on the wrong problem, right? Isn't it shocking that we, as a humanity, have got actually so little insight into the underlying things in the finance world, but also in many other things in business, where there are so many valuable data pieces we just don't know and don't understand because we haven't got the right access to it, haven't got the right analysis. So I think being able to access the information is crucial, to have that transparency as well. Yeah, this is a quote again from a bit of analysis we've done internally. We found that our petabyte scale customers, 40% of them actually never even talk to us before they get to that point because they can just do it themselves. It's easy. This comes back to the point of failing fast, right? If you had to go to the CFO and say, I plan a 7-year project, it's going to cost 7 million quid, and we're going to look at the data and try and find something in the data. And then when you give me the money and you start the project, and 7 years later you come back and say, thank you very much for the check, and we've done the project, it's done. And they says, what's the result? I said, no, we didn't find anything. But can we start another project, another 7 years, another 7 million quid? He's not going to give you the second check, right? Whereas if you could say, I wonder what's the answer on this, you can go and ask the system a question, make a query across trillions of records, find the answer and say, no, that didn't show any insights, but try it again the next day. or the next few minutes, then you're bound to find some interesting stuff. So cloud enables us to fail faster and try things quicker. I had a great conversation with a gentleman from East London University. Thank you very much. About failing fast as well. And we were talking about, he's teaching students, amongst other things, how to write apps. And we were talking about when you start a business, it's no longer required to have a big business plan months in ahead, build something over years, and then find out it fails. You can just try something, spin it up, and see whether there's any interest, and give up or change your direction, right? Again, I want to challenge you in terms of your organization. Is there anything, any opportunity you're missing today that you should be tackling? Anything you could be trying right now and failing on quickly and learning from and moving on? So, obligatory customer quotes. Ocado is using our systems. They've got a very interesting business model, and I love them as a business. But what's interesting is the speed of operation is really crucial to them, right? The speed with which they get the bread from the baker to you means that they've got more money in the bank for longer than Tesco's or anybody else. That's why they can provide you fresher bread and make more money. And part of that speed, essence of speed, is how the whole operation works. So amongst other things, they're using PubSub, to one of our technologies, to send information across between all the systems. And it is super fast, and there's no scale limit to that. And they were saying that it took us half a day to write something that previously would have taken us over 6 months to build using Spark, right? Because they just don't have to care about the environment, they can just spin it up. SunGuard, a finance customer, big numbers on there, accomplished in 6 weeks what they thought would have taken a year, right? So there's plenty of things there. So let me get to chapter 3. I've got 3 minutes left. I want to make sure I use this 3 minutes best. This is a reality check. I want to acknowledge that I understand that you guys have got a super tough challenge. Every one of you that I've spoken to, I realize you have got a really tough job. IT and the CIO, CTO, in most cases are not loved by the organization. In fact, only a quarter of execs, a recent study showed, only a quarter of execs rate their CIO counterpart as performing better than their peers. There's a risk for all of us to fall in that category of he's overhead, she's not adding value, IT is not helping. The opportunity for us, though, is to change the world. Right? We've got all these building blocks. We've got all the opportunity to create new things. Right? Cloud enables you and me to build new things that was impossible last week. And you can do it in your spare time, on the side. Or you can, as one of the big, well-known brands, they've made a commitment to go one direction. One of their guys came to us and said, I haven't got permission to do this. I want to try something else that I think will change our business. Can you help me? He spent 2 days with us. After 2 days, they had this amazing, amazing demo. He took it back to his organization and blown them away, and they've changed direction because of that. Right? There's that kind of opportunity for you and I to add real value and change the world, make it a better place. So with that, I'm going to stop right there. Just want to briefly ask, are there any questions other than the tax question that I can answer? There was a lot of questions beforehand about security. Andrew Moss, where are you? Do you want to answer the security question? No? Oh, great job. Great job. Security, is that a concern for anybody? So I think Paul did a great job of responding to that, right? Look at who's got the most resources for this. You know, I'm very proud to say that the recent Heartbeat SSL vulnerability was something that Google knew about nearly a year before it became public. Could fix all our internal systems. We found the problem. We then contacted the right people to highlight the risks. We then started patching other machines outside of Google as well, and then only it came to light, right? So if you think you can beat that, if you think you can provide safer environment, then then let me know, because I'd love to talk to you about that, because I'd love to then bring our business to you. But so security, we are very confident. We've got a great story there. HMRC is running on us. The Cabinet Office is running on us. There are many other government organizations running on us that I can't even mention. So there are fantastic banks running on our platform already. Some of them we can mention, others we can't. So the point is, if you're really serious about security, then have a conversation with us, because I'm very confident we can give you a better story there than what you'll get anywhere else. Thank you very much.